After nearly 10 years of cosmetic updates and mild refreshes, Honda has given the Unicorn something new, which has given us this new Unicorn 160. Even a quick glance will tell you that this Unicorn 160 is more modern and more upmarket in its styling when compared to the older Unicorn. And that's not all. The Unicorn's 150cc engine has also been extensively reworked to deliver 163 cc's of displacement for this motorcycle. The new Unicorn 160 is good news indeed. But how good a motorcycle is it? Well, to find out, we're pitting it against our segment benchmark, the Suzuki Gixxer. So is the Unicorn 160 ready to trump the Suzuki? The Gixxer's 155cc engine develops 14.6 bhp of power at 8000 rpm. The Unicorn is just slightly lower at 14.5 bhp, which is also delivered at 8000 rpm. The Gixxer makes a healthy 1.43 kilograms of peak torque at 6000 rpm. The Unicorn's engine has a longer stroke, and as such it develops a bit more torque, 1.5 kilograms at an identical 6000 rpm. So these air-cooled, carbureted, single-cylinder engines aren't too different. On paper, the power plants of these two motorcycles are really closely matched. But out on the road, things were quite interesting. Take a look at what happened when we did roll-on acceleration tests in third gear from really low down in the rev range. Open the throttle from about 30 km per hour in third gear. And surprise! It's the Gixxer that scampers ahead. It clearly has more torque available lower down in the rev range, and this builds into a strong mid-range and a gutsy top end. This means, in stop-go traffic, the Gixxer will be much easier to ride, and it will be much quicker coming out of corners as well. The Unicorn feels more peppy at the top end of its rev range. Its rev limiter also comes in at 11,000 rpm as compared to the Gixxer's more conservative 10,000 rpm. Surprisingly though, even in standing acceleration runs, the Gixxer kept the Unicorn within arm's reach, and the bass note from the Gixxer's twin-port exhaust made it seem even more keen. The Unicorn 160 has more revs on offer, and it is more eager at the top end of its rev range. That also means you have to work it just that little bit harder to access the performance. Whereas on the Gixxer, there's lots of torque low down in the rev range. It's really easy to use, and at the same time, it's really fun to thrash around as well. And when you package that into a chassis that's as nice as this, it's going to be a fun motorcycle to ride. So, can the Unicorn 160 keep up with the Gixxer when you show it a nice winding road? First, the hardware. The Unicorn 160 has wider tires than the old Unicorn, but the Gixxer's tires are wider still, and it has a radial rear. Both motorcycles use monoshock suspensions at the rear, but at the front, the telescopic forks on the Gixxer are beefier. The Unicorn offers the option of combined braking with a 240mm disc at the front and a drum at the rear. The Gixxer also uses a drum at the rear, but it boasts of a 268mm disc at the front. But there is no combined braking on offer here. Other differences become apparent in the saddle. The Unicorn feels very commuter-oriented with forward-set pegs and a strangely short handlebar that keeps you from getting really comfy. But the Unicorn 160 is light on its feet, and it slices corners with a calm casualness. However, the tires limit its dynamic range, and the disc brake, although strong and progressive, lacks feel. Meanwhile, the Gixxer keeps hinting at its more youthful inclinations. The ergonomics have a sporting edge as you lean forward onto the handlebar. The slightly rear set pegs complement the setup perfectly. The contours on the tank are just right to anchor onto. The grip from the tires is plenty, and there's lots of feel too. The longer wheelbase increases the sense of composure. The bi-brake disc brake offers great bite and feel at the lever. So when you are in the saddle, the Suzuki will tempt you to ride hard. And if you choose to respond, you will realize that this is very nearly a sports bike. Ride these motorcycles back to back and you get the feeling that the Unicorn's heart really isn't in having fun. I mean, from the seating position
And then of course the way it turns into corners is light and quick, but it doesn't feel as secure and it just doesn't feel as thrilling. The seating position on the Gixxer is sporty, the components, everything works towards drawing you into the ride. But let's not get carried away, these motorcycles also have to deal with the daily grind.
The Unicorn has a few advantages on the practical front. It feels lighter to steer and it has a slightly smaller turning radius. It is also better in terms of fuel efficiency, returning 42.4 km per litre in the city and 48.6 km per litre on the highway. But the big differentiator between the two is ride quality. Over broken tarmac, the Gixxer has a firmer edge, while the Unicorn suspension setup feels softer. But it's the Unicorn that sends more shocks through to the rider, while the Gixxer feels flatter and soaks up bumps better.
Well, throughout this comparison is the Suzuki that's had the edge over the Honda. But can the Unicorn claw back ground when it comes to design and equipment?
The Suzuki isn't the prettiest motorcycle, but it looks sharper, lighter and more aggressive. Honda has given the Unicorn 160 an all-new look. It is smoother, more sporty and more sophisticated. A nice new touch is the edge-shaped tail lamp at the rear, but overall this design lacks character and appeal. It is better suited for those looking for a bland commuter and is unlikely to appeal to the younger riders. The Unicorn also lacks on the equipment front. Unlike the Gixxer, it doesn't have an engine kill switch and the LCD display, although cool to look at, lacks a gear position indicator. And Honda has cut corners by moving the choke lever down and adopted a steel trellis frame instead of the alloy subframe for the pillion footrest. Without combi brakes, the Unicorn 160 is about 2000 rupees less expensive, but is that lower price tag really enough?
We've waited a really long time for an update to the Unicorn. And now that we have the Unicorn 160, we have to admit that we are a fair bit disappointed because it hasn't moved the game forward in its pace on any particular front. And when you compare it to the Gixxer, it just presses the point home. Yes, you do pay a little bit more for the Suzuki, but for that little bit extra, you're getting a lot more bike.